Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our November session of the CBRL Graduate Network Development Seminar Series. As a part of this monthly series, we are delighted to feature distinguished professors from universities in both Jordan and UK and institution, sharing their expertise and insight variety of topics. Today's session titled Collecting, Processing, Analyzing Data to Interviews, and it will be presented by Dr. Renee Hattar. Dr. Renee is the director of the Royal Institute for Interfaith Studies in Jordan. She will be giving us a brief overview of the various research methods used the human science and the related field, with the specialist focus on interview as the key tool of the collection and analyzing data. The culture will offer a brief overview of research method in human science and present the survey of the collecting data by interviews. Dr. Renee Hattar is the director of Royal Institute for Interfaith Studies in Amman, Jordan from August 2021. After she started with them in 2016 as a head of international studies program and projects. Dr. Renee holds a PhD in Peace Studies from the University of Granada, Spain. She is a specialist in music and peace, with the focus on Arab Christian studies, interfaith, and peace building. She has participated in many conferences, workshops, trainings, and studies on different topics, such as Arab Christian studies, peace building, music and peace, dialogue, and interfaith. Dr. Hattar has a number of publications on these topics. She is also active member in several local and international communities and study groups. Between 2006 and 2016, she worked as the coordinator of the Middle East Department in the International Center for the Study Christian Oriental in Granada, Spain. From 2080 to 2060, she also taught Arabic language and culture at the Institute of the Theology Lonum Jandium, which affiliated with the Faculty of Theology at the San Dumas Iles Estical University in Spain. Between 2012 and 2016, she served as president of the Christian-Muslim Interfaith Relation for the Spanish Episcopal Conference. She has also participated in developing contact of training manual to different projects such Turathuna, Our Shared Heritage, Teacher of Tomorrow, and Empowered Teachers. So, welcome, Dr. Renee. And please note, this session will be recorded as a part of a webinar format. We will kindly ask everyone to submit the question if they have any question using Q&A box. And Dr. Renee will address this after the session. Thank you for joining us, and we're looking forward to enjoying the productive seminars. So, Dr. Renee, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Renee. And I want to start by thanking the CBRL for this series of lectures, because I think it's very important today to help young researchers especially, and even researchers in their stages of master's programs and PhD programs, because some of the data collection methods and research methods could be a bit tricky. Sometimes we don't have enough help on the ground because we study them in theory, but when it comes to practice, it becomes a bit more tricky to find all the right answers to all our work. So I hope I can be of help today. My experience comes from the social sciences and humanities. And so I hope that the methods I'm going to display today regarding interviews could be of help to all of us, and looking forward to hearing your questions as well. So I am sharing the presentation, so I hope it's clear for everyone before I start. So if we talk about research methods in general, we have different methods to collect data, analyze it, and make it of benefit for our own research. So the big questions would be, how do we collect data? We need to find one of the methods between interviews, for instance, or surveys, or focus group discussions, etc. And this would always depend on our research question. So do we need a qualitative method or a quantitative method? This means, do I need more numbers? Do I need to collect numbers, statistics about the areas I'm studying or the subjects of my research, the research question? Would that be a benefit? Or do I need qualitative? So quantitative is what we are counting, so numbers, data, in figures, or as I said, depending on what I'm collecting, and qualitative, which depends, which will really give me a more depth information about the subject, about my research from certain people. This could be also a primary or a secondary collecting data method. So will I collect original data myself, or will I use data that has been already collected by someone else? Do I need to be descriptive or experimental? This means, will I take measurements of something as it is, or will I perform an experiment? And this would actually count more for the scientific research rather than humanities and social sciences, generally speaking. So the research methods, we just discussed the what or which data and how I'm going to collect it. I also need to know how to analyze my data. If I'm going to choose the quantitative data, then I will be talking about the statistical analysis methods, because as I said, we need stats, we need numbers, etc. And we test them with the relationship between the different variables we will get from the analysis. For qualitative data, we need methods such as the thematic analysis, which we'll talk about today, to interpret the patterns and the meanings of all the data that we collected from different participants. So today we will focus on one qualitative analysis method, which is the interviews. So we can have open-ended surveys, we can have literature reviews, we can have case studies, ethnographies, but we will focus on interviews. And all these are research methods that can be used for the qualitative method. So we have different types of interviews for our research usually, and we need to choose what kind of interviews we need. Do we need the structured interviews, which can be determined by the questions that we are asking? We have the unstructured interviews that are more free-flowing, and we have the semi-structured interviews, which are in between of the two. So half and half, let's just say. So for the structured interviews, we need to ask, those are just examples, okay, to make things easier. Do you like dogs? The answer would be yes or no. Do you associate dogs with feelings? And you give options like happy, somewhat happy, neutral. This way I am structuring the answer, and the participant only has to choose from what I asked. While if I unstructured the interview, I would ask directly and have more space for the participant to answer. For instance, What feelings do dogs bring out in you? The answer cannot be yes or no. The participant has to elaborate. That's why it's unstructured. Or for instance, when you think more deeply about this, what experiences would you say your feelings are rooted in? Again, they need to elaborate, they need to think, and they need to give you answers that have more, let's just say, thought towards your question. And then, of course, we have the semi-structured interviews. Do you like dogs? Yes or no? If yes, name one attribute of dogs that you like. If no, name one attribute of dogs that you don't like. Here we mixed the two methods. We gave one question that was structured, like yes and no question, and another one that was a little bit more open. And this is the semi-structured. So when conducting the interviews, after I chose what interviews I'm going to use, etc., I have to study my options. In which sense? For instance, will I be conducting my interviews by phone? Will I have enough time and resources to do them face-to-face, especially that this will involve traveling, it will involve preparing, seeing people face-by-face, which according to the costs and the available time we have. And the situation, for instance, like the COVID time. Excuse me. Yeah. Okay. And then we have a third option, which could be the online interviews. And here, for instance, when we did research during the COVID period, we opted for the online and the phone interviews, not just the face-to-face. And of course, it will also depend on the number of people I'm interviewing, the period that I need, how much time I have left for my research and the analysis phases and the results phases. Okay. Okay. So we have different steps for conducting the interviews. I'll review them with you just to give you some examples. First of all, we need to design the interview questions after I chose everything that we just talked about. And here we need to decide who we will interview. And of course, when you decide the who, you have to decide why the selection of this person. And we'll talk more about this. What kind of information do we want to obtain from the interviews? How will that help our research question? What will it add? How will it enrich our results in order to give some substance for our research? Why do we want to pursue in-depth information around our research topic? And that's why we chose the interviews to begin with. The next phase, after we decide on all these questions and design our interview questions, we need to develop an interview guide. How? We need to introduce ourselves and explain the aim of the interview. And this phase is very, very important because we need to build some trust with the people we are interviewing. The participants are always reluctant for one reason or another. So once they think you know what you're doing, you have clear questions, you explain everything very well, and they get more comfortable understanding why you're doing this study, what is the aim of this interview, why they were chosen. It gives them a bit of a trust to talk to you more openly and help you more with information seeking. We also need to have a sequence to our questions and to the topics that we are proposing by grouping them in themes. This way, when we ask the questions, the participants can see the relationship, or at least can feel that it's more structured, that you are very well in control of the topic that you're asking about, and that you know why you have the sequence. We need to make sure that we can easily move back and forth between the questions and the topics. This way, if we heard anything interesting and we want more elaboration on it, we can go back. Like, if, for instance, you said in the first answer this and that, how do you reflect that on the third answer you just gave me, for instance? And then we also need to make sure that the questions are clear and easy to understand, because sometimes when we are doing research and we have been doing it for such some time, let's just say in depth, we think that everybody understands what we are talking about. But many times people do not know your theme as much as you do, and we can get into this confusion, let's just say, of explaining something that we think is clear but is not very clear to everyone else. So we need to simplify and make our questions very clear as much as we can, putting ourselves into the shoes of any participant that's going to help us or be part of this interview. And the last thought in this phase is not to ask leading questions. Sometimes we do it without paying attention, but we may ask a question that would lead to one or two answers and not give us the actual opinion of the participant. And this happens easily. We also need to plan and manage the interview logistics. For instance, do we need to bring a second interviewer with us? Because, for instance, in the first interview, I could not focus my full attention on the participant and ask and write and maybe record at the same time. So if I have an assistant, maybe they will take care of the recording, taking notes, making sure we have all the data, and I will give my full attention to the participant in order to gain their trust and in order to tell them how interested we are in everything they are saying, because we need to show them patience, we need to show them that we are interested, that we have full ears, because we did contact them to benefit from their knowledge on the topic that we chose. If we don't do that, this can create some, let's just say, lack of interest with the participants. And in that question, they will not be fully engaged in the interview. Do we want to bring a note taker? As I said, somebody to help, a second interviewer, a note taker. Do we want to record the interviews? If so, do we have enough time to transcribe the interview recordings and then give it the same attention to the other interviews? Because this is another extra work. As you know, for each hour of speech, we need 2 hours of transcription if we are good at it and if the recording is very, very clear. So this is also a point that you have to think of. Where will the interview take place is very important. The setting could not be of any distraction, like a noisy place. It can't be very far away from where the participant is. We have, of course, to ask them whether they mind or not coming to the place you are at, but maybe it's more comfortable for us to go there. So is that feasible for us? Do we have enough time? Do we have enough money sometimes, like enough funding for the research to do that? Or maybe we should opt for an online interview or a phone interview. Okay, all these options that we just explored. How long will each interview take? And this is very important as well, to calculate that you have enough time for each stage of the interviews. And finally, we will get back to this point in detail. Do we need to address the terms of confidentiality? For instance, many participants do not want their names to be mentioned. And of course, there's a solution for that. Some others do not mind, and some actually ask you to mention their name because they want to take credit for the interview they gave you. They think it's work. They gave you some of their thoughts, and they believe that this is part of their rights to have their name mentioned in your study. So we have different participants with different opinions, and this is how we need to decide on the terms of confidentiality according to them and their opinions in respect for what they just gave you in the interview. There are different considerations, important considerations for the research interviews. The first one is the bias. We need to be very careful about bias, and we need to strive for neutrality to avoid any influencing in the participants' response. The sampling, we need to select the participants, and we were just laughing about this with Rudaina because it's very hard to select the participants according to the themes that we have in our research, and we need to select them according to diverse representation, different backgrounds, different experiences, and this is how they would enrich our data. We cannot select them based on who we know, why we know them, or maybe where they work. Maybe you can choose one or two in that sense that you think that maybe they would represent one of the groups. But even if they have different opinions, we need to opt for this variety of opinions, of people in the same field. And this is what would enrich our data. Ethics, concerns, and confidentiality that we just mentioned. We need to adhere to ethical guidelines and obtain informed consent from participants. And I remember preparing the consent forms with my colleagues who did many of our studies. We need to make sure that we are protecting the privacy and maintaining the confidentiality of the details of the participants. And we need to make sure that in the same form they are going to sign and give you their consent, we need to explain very well everything about the study. The aim, why we're doing it, the goals, what we are thinking that the results might be, why we are conducting them, from which institute or research institute or university, which affiliation do we have and why we're doing this, with which partners, who are the researchers, how do we maintain a privacy policy during research, etc. So all these points are very important to gain the trust of the participants and also to get them to give you this consent and give you the data you need from them before, during, and after conducting the interviews. Respecting differences is very important. We need to make sure to understand the cultural diversities and the respect of the differences. We need to try that to make our questions non-offensive in any way and to have a healthy boundary between us and the participants and respect the differences in opinions. We cannot have strong opinions. We need to be as neutral as we can and analyze their answers according to their background, their opinion, and understand why they think the way we think about any topic. And this is actually the enrichment of our data, of what we're getting from the interviews. So the choice of the method depends on the research objective, the nature of the data, and the types of insights the researcher aims to achieve. The interview analysis methods enable a structured yet flexible interpretation of qualitative data, providing valuable findings that would contribute to the broader research needs. Okay, so we get to the, let's just say, hardest part of our presentation, which is the data analysis. When it comes to interviews, because we have in-depth data, we have opinions, we don't have numbers, let's just say, we have more explanation of everything we asked about. We have different ways of interpreting and analyzing this data. And each method, let's just say, that we will choose will help me in a way. And sometimes we need to mix the methods somehow. And that's why today it's very hard for me to talk about all the methods. So I'll explore only one. So here we talk about thematic analysis, grounded theory, narrative analysis, comparative analysis, content analysis. As I said, it would all depend on the method we chose, why we want to choose it according to our own research, and how we want to analyze the data. So as an example, I will talk today only about thematic analysis. So thematic analysis identifies the common themes across the interviews that we're going to talk about. So first of all, we need to familiarize ourselves with the data. And this is done by repeatedly reading or hearing the recording of our interviews and going through the transcripts many times. We need to listen, we need to read, we need to take initial notes and start connecting the dots. This phase is crucial for the immersion in the data set, allowing the researchers to start an initial impression onto how to understand this data and how to understand the context of the participants. So listening is an art. We cannot be impatient. We need to read, and listen. This way we can start to understand how to connect the dots, how this is important for our research, and why the participant was talking about the data in that way, in that moment, in the context he was talking. After familiarizing ourselves with the data, we need to generate initial codes. How do we generate the codes? We need to assign labels or short phrases to segments of the text that capture significant or recurring ideas. So for each idea that I saw, I will give this label, I will give a code. Each code represents an important concept or observation, and this step helps us to break the data down into manageable, categorized parts. So the code will give me a category as well. After I did the coding and the categories, I will start searching for themes. Once the data has been coded entirely, we need to review the codes to find the overarching themes between the codes, or the patterns, let's call them, between the codes. This would involve grouping related codes together and identifying the topics that are emerging across the data set. Themes go beyond the codes to patterns, to the patterns of meaning. This way you can capture all these codes, themes, categories, and connect them to your research and how you want to analyze the data according to these codes and these categories. Then we start reviewing and refining the themes, because maybe at the first glance, we get confused between the codes and the themes, and we'll have enough themes, and maybe some of them would not be related to our data, or would be maybe misinterpreted, or it would be maybe an addition to all the themes we have. So mostly we can connect the themes together and find maybe less or fewer themes, or maybe sometimes more. So we need to keep on reviewing, refining until we get the set of codes, the set of categories, and the set of themes about all the interviews, and then collect them together. Of course, we need to make sure that they are comprehensive and accurate in representing the data that we just collected, and then refining them by combining or breaking them apart as needed will capture the insights and the keys that we're looking for our data analysis. Of course, after we refined all this, we need to define and name the themes. Once these themes are reviewed, as I said, we name them, we get the essence of the data they represent, and then we can write a detailed description of each theme. We can even put examples so as to remember what we are talking about, and we can talk in relevance of the research question and support it with the data experts. So we keep on looking when we do the space with the research questions, sometimes with the objectives, with the goals, and then this way our skills of let's just say cross-analyzing all these categories we did can help us understand how to make the themes more comprehensive, more understandable, and give us more insight for the data we collected. Then we need to write the report, and this is the final phase. This will include a detailed narrative explaining how these themes are identified, why did we identify them this way, what do they mean for our research, and how they would help us answer the research question. The write-up integrates direct quotes from the participants and a synthesis of the thematic findings. Of course, if the participants do not want their names to be mentioned, we can still either change the names or write with quotes, but write the exact quotes they said. That would not be a problem, in case any of you were asking or wondering. Okay, I will stop here. I did not expect to go that fast. And maybe I will give you an example of a study we did at RIIFS after the COVID, during and after the COVID. We did a study on the freedom of worship in Jordan, because between all the closing we had of different mosques and churches, we wanted to know if people were against the closure of churches and mosques during the COVID for the safety, and would that affect their freedom of worship or not? So we opted for two research methods. One was the survey questions because we wanted to reach as many people in the different governorates and from different religions and backgrounds in order to answer to our questions. And of course, we did that online. And we also wanted to give interviews with experts on the topic. This way, they would help us analyze the answers that we obtained from the surveys. So I will just show you how we did the categories. I hope I have the document. Okay, I'll stop sharing for a moment. I'm sorry. Just 1 second. Let me share again. Okay. Can you see my documents?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here, for instance, we did interviews, and we got to, after the analysis, we got to compare the research questions with the categories and the themes and the topics that were related. So one big category was religion. When we were talking about religion, we were talking about diversity, minorities, spiritual life, religious institutions, and religious leaders. When we talked about freedom, we saw that the freedom subject was usually connected to worship and to women. And of course, when we asked about the pandemic, when people mentioned the pandemic, we were talking about mental health, emergency law, economic side, social relations, and religious tourism. For instance, the research questions were, did the public health emergency caused by the coronavirus pandemic turn into a human rights crisis? And you can, of course, see the keywords mentioned here in the question. What was the impact of closing down the houses of worship, whether mosques or churches, on behaviors and spiritual life status of Jordanians? Again, here you can choose from all these categories and do the exercise vice versa. So you can get the categories from the question and then apply them. Of course, we also compared them to the expected results, like to provide analysis of the situation of freedom of worship and religious practice in Jordan at the time of the corona pandemic. This was one of our expected results. So through analyzing and cross-analyzing all these categories, this is what gets us to answer our questions. So if we had yes/no questions, it was an answer to a specific question. Again, a structured question. And when it was an elaboration on an in-depth information, this was a more free question. So as I said here, we were trying to see how to code, and I was explaining to the researchers the difference between the themes, the categories, and the codes. So the themes were a word or phrase that described the broader overarching idea, while the category would be to describe a group of codes, and the codes would be to represent a singular. Okay, so how many codes do we have? How do they help with the end results? How do they help in the single transcript? And here we gave examples of barriers to achieving learning goals is the theme, while environmental strain, competing demands is the category. The code would have to do with the time, if they were tired or not, care, life work, and of course this was an example from a text we did to connect one idea or one example at the same time of a study that was done on on environmental strains and demands for achieving the learning goals in the educational system. Okay, so I think I'll stop here, and then maybe we will take questions. I see that people start typing questions.